Welcome to the Royals Investment Fund podcast, where we meet with professionals in the business and investing world. Like you, we want to gain insight and advice from seasoned individuals regarding their careers, investment choices, and other life recommendations. Through this podcast, we interview a variety of business leaders and experts, learning about both their achievements as well as their failures and why they were able to be so successful. This podcast is designed to help you. You are someone with a curiosity in business who wants to learn more and find out what intrigues you most within the business world. I invite you to join us while we explore a multitude of industries and talk with people who have already experienced this journey. I'm your host, Tony Harris. Now let's begin our journey. On this episode, I was able to chat with one of our very own professional directors, Lucas Bunting. Lucas is a Bethel graduate, and during his time at Bethel, he was highly active in the various business clubs that Bethel has to offer. He is one of the founders of the Royals Investment Fund, and is a member of the CFA Institute, from which he has received his certification in all three levels. I would now like to invite Lucas to the show to talk about his current position as a quantitative equity analyst at Mars & Power and his strategy on investing. Well, Lucas, thank you very much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be a guest on your show and looking forward to chat.
Awesome. Well, can you tell me a little bit about your position as a quantitative analyst at Mars & Power? And along with that, how you got into that position?
Yeah, sure. So I graduated from Bethel in December of 2015. And I walked across the stage on, I think, Friday the 18th. I pushed really hard in school to get the most out of it, and I ended up, with a good GPA and class rank, but it really came at a large sort of mental and physical cost. And then, starting a job right after that, I always try to tell people, negotiate a later start date if you can, if they're trying to get you right after you graduate. Anyways, I dove right into the Wells Fargo in their private bank on their investment team, and it was a great place to learn. It was fulfilling work. You got to work directly with clients and you got to meet the people who you were impacting with your work, and I owe a lot of that to a previous guest of yours, Dean Junkins. He helped me with the interview process there and the continued mentorship after that. After a couple of years there, I was kind of getting my CFA at the same time and passed a couple levels, but then an opportunity presented itself to go to a company called Mars & Power, where I am right now. It's Minnesota's oldest privately owned investment firm. It was started in the 1930s and is still around today. It's got a really good performance track record, and I'm kind of the first quantitative analyst there, and we can dig into that a little bit more later. But that's where my career path is, and where I think it will be in the next couple of years.
That's wonderful. And Did you always know that that's what you wanted to do right out of college? Or, was this something that kind of came up throughout your years? How did that look for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think more than anything, I just kind of got lucky. I was actually going to go into school as a marketing major. I think I declared before entering as a marketing major like you. And honestly, the person who changed, my parents were supportive, nothing there. The person who changed my mind was actually, we were sitting down at our kind of bank branch and stuff. I was just tagging along with my parents when I was getting ready to go to college. And he's like, so where are you going to go into? And I said marketing. And, this was kind of when the financial crisis was still kind of fresh in everybody's minds. And the guy's like, yeah, well, you might want to look in finance, because those are the last people to go when things get bad and stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll look into finance. I like math and stuff. And I started taking a couple courses and I liked it. Right. And then I just tried to pick a career path that I thought was fun. And that was investments, right? The world changes every day. There's There's kind of winners and losers. I'm a little competitive, and and then just kind of the way that the capital markets worked, I always thought was interesting. And you could spend an entire career there and not know everything about it. So kind of the depth that was there all attracted me to it. And then as I got into the real world, I just realized that it was a good fit, and I got lucky. I chose correctly, and that's it. Um, and even then, I was in the industry, but I was in the private wealth part of it. I still like it, but I think I liked the asset management, the research side a little more. So even then, I still had to adjust a little bit, but um, you know, uh, I still like to think that I just got lucky more than anything. And students aren't really sure what they want to do going into the real world, and they just kind of guess, and it isn't good for some people, and some it's great. So I really feel bad for those people who have a bad experience out of the chute, but it gets better.
Absolutely, yeah. And you were kind of talking a little bit about the investment industry and your experience diving into it. And obviously it's a very complex, diverse industry with so many different things going on. And you mentioned, not necessarily going into it thinking you're going to be a quantitative analyst. But you've talked to me a little bit about your algorithm that you've used to buy stocks. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And then what are some of the main items you look for when investing into a company?
Yeah, sure. So I'll actually answer that second question first. So quantitatively, we have a traditional multi-factor model that helps us distill our core philosophy of Mars and Power's investment strategy. And what we try to do is we kind of boil it all down into one number, which is a ranking 1 to 10 for any individual security. It's not perfect, but it can be very handy when screening 4,000 securities every day. And the performance hasn't been all that bad either. I launched the model at the beginning of 2019, and the top ranked securities outperformed the S&P 500 by 5% this year. Last time I checked, which was earlier this week, it was outperforming by about 7%. So now, can that continue? Maybe, maybe not, but it's good to see some of that early success. But really to answer that question, that model looks for companies that generate high economic profits, and assumes they have some sort of competitive advantage in there, and that the earnings are high quality and the valuation is attractive. We try to pick a couple factors that really got at that type of company. We put them together, and we try to make a ranking out of them. So what that does is it helps us leverage the other part of our business, the fundamental research, which there are no real scaling benefits in that part of it. It's just kind of, you got to slog through it. You got to go through the financials. You got to talk to the sell side. You got to talk to the company management. It's just hardcore research. And to be able to have something that will tell us most likely where that time will be best spent is what that model does. Now, we also do have algorithms, as you said. There's nothing in deployment right now, but I'm currently researching an algorithm to help us predict things. So it's not going to trade for us. We're not that type of investor. I think our average holding period is something around 15 years, which is very, very, very long. Most shops kind of have a 6 month to 1 year time horizon. But anyways, what our algorithm does is help us make better predictions and aid in the valuation and idea generation that our other model does. So right now I'm trying to predict when the 1 year consensus estimate is likely to be wrong, like either, and then kind of pick the direction of that error, right? Is it going to be, is the estimate for next year going to be too high, or is it going to be way too low? And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to use algorithms to help us make a lot of predictions on a lot of names, so that we can then leverage that information to take whatever investment manager's time is and make sure that they're spending their time in the most efficient way.
That's very interesting. I guess
Yeah.
kind of a follow-up question off of that. Obviously, you have all of these different models that help you predict, where a company might go. But when you're investing, what for you is kind of that ultimate decision maker that's like, yeah, we're going to invest in this, or no, like this isn't for us. Do you have something specifically that, kind of gives you that idea of like, we're going to do this or not?
Yeah, and I would say, it's multifaceted, but I think the two main points are, is this a great company? Like, is this a company that is going to have a competitive advantage for our time horizon? So for the next 15 years, that's really hard to tell, right? The world changes really quickly, and so we monitor that. But that needs to be one criteria. Is it historically been very good, and do we see a good path forward? And then the other part is, and I'm sure you've heard this before, not all great companies make great investments. Sometimes it's just you can only get the equity for a very, very high price. And to us, that just doesn't make that much sense. There's only so much space before you hit that ceiling from a valuation perspective. So if a stock at its core, if a stock does not meet both of those criteria, if it's not a good company, or if we can't get it at a good price, then we'll turn away from it. If it's screaming yes on both of those, then we'll start looking at it and just do our due diligence, and then we'll add it to the portfolio.
That makes sense. Yeah. What do you find to be the most difficult part about your job in a quantitative analyst position, and how do you navigate through that?
Yeah. So on the quant side, so I do actually have two responsibilities. I do actually do both quantitative and fundamental. So I do the actual, hardcore research, and then I do the more quantitative research on the side. And I'd say, on the quant side, the hardest part is just staying up to date and just on the methods that you're using, right? And making sure that that's the best approach to be tackling this problem or that problem. The world of machine learning, especially, is just riddled with academic notation, and you really do have to. And I don't have a math background, so that's stuff I all had to learn, kind of along the way. And you really do take for granted your professors who can throw a formula up there and then explain it to you like a normal person what that means, right? I think a lot of people would not know the kind of academic notation for weighted average, but we all know what it is, right? It just looks pretty complex when it really isn't that complex of an idea. So point in favor for the professors for distilling that sort of stuff. So that part is difficult. And then I would also say kind of just getting all the data together. Data is so expensive to get if you want it nice and clean. It's either expensive when you pay for it and you get the perfect product, or it's expensive because you have to allocate resources, i.e. me, to go out, scrape websites, go find, this data source, try to, get this cheaper, whatever it is, build the data pipeline between, your model and that data set. And then at the end of the day, make sure that it's useful to the model that you're looking at, and to be able to maintain all that. I'm a one-man effort here, so I'm the end-to-end process. And I mean, there are teams of like 100 people doing, what I'm doing. So I can only do it at a very high level, right? So I would just say, that academically it's challenging. And then just kind of the breadth of things that you have to be good at is challenging. And then on the fundamental side, I'd say that just the difficulty of that is that when the markets are open, you're on, but news is even released at night. So it's really, really hard, just from a work-life balance sort of thing, to disconnect from work when you know that the world just keeps spinning and it impacts what you're investing in, therefore it impacts the clients that you're responsible for. So that can be a challenge, and that can be enough of an off-putting thing for a lot of people to never join the industry and just pay someone else to do it for them.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, how do you balance, work and life? I was talking to you and Andrew yesterday a little bit about it, and obviously you said it's very important to you, but how do you balance it? And along with that, what role does faith play into your career?
Yeah, so it's a good question. The way I think about it is that it's more harmony than balance. And, before I share my framework, let me just be clear about one thing. The amount of work and life you will have is likely you need to have, with your significant other, with your family, whatever the stakeholders are in your life. Y'all need to realistically evaluate what's fair and hold each other accountable to that agreement, even when it gets tough. It's just too easy to let work take over your life, especially in the early parts of your career, if you're not intentional about the decisions that you make. So, anyways, back to kind of the work-life harmony, there are two things I think about when it comes to answering this question. I have the long-term perspective of your entire career, and then the short-term sort of year-to-year, month-to-month, day-to-day implications of your life. So in your career, you have you can likely devote more time to work than to life at the beginning of your career when you're trying to prove yourself, right? And then somewhere in the middle, you will make this decision where you can either stay operating at that high level and try to chase whatever opportunity is in front of you, or you can choose to start backing off a little to devote more time to yourself, to life, to other things that you care more about, right? Like you're going to have to be able to get away from work to go to your kid's soccer game, or to go to start up this new hobby or whatever that you're doing, or maybe you have another company in mind, a nonprofit, whatever it is. Toward the end of that career, you do usually start working less. You do see a lot of people just kind of coming in a little later and leaving a little earlier because they see the end is near, right? They want to get on with the rest of their life while they're still healthy and still good, and that makes a lot of sense. But that really isn't a straight line. Sometimes work demands more one day. This could be for a couple days, maybe a week or a year, right? And that's why it's important to have that discipline. But it's just best to take it one day at a time and to have people around you um, to be able to keep you accountable to the things that you promised them. In terms of faith, it's always difficult leaving the Bethel bubble and then going in and doing that. In some places, talking about faith will get you a one-way ticket to the HR, space or whatever. It's honestly best to be a little cautious there. You do have to realize that we live in a world where Christianity has a lot of baggage with it. Not a lot of people are cool with that idea, and I learned that pretty quickly because, and this is a great story. So there was this man. He one of my best friends at Wells Fargo. And it was my first week on the job, and obviously it was December 22nd. So I said, "Hey, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next week and stuff." And he's like, "Oh, dude, I'm not Christian. I'm Jewish," and and then he just proceeded to give me a hard time about that and all that stuff, and he's just laughing because I'm just so green. I'm red in the face, right? I'm just sweating, and I'm just like, "Oh God, I'm sorry." I didn't even realize that I've spent 4 years at Bethel, and everybody's, it's just it just kind of slips your mind, and you don't really think about it, and so you just kind of learn fast where you do just kind of go with the norms and stuff, and then community, like at your church or through groups or whatever you have, just becomes that much more important because you don't get a daily dose of it every day in your life. So I think there's this shift of just having it all. You're always around it, you're always in it, and you're always thinking about it. It's easy to think about it, and then your world becomes almost dichotomized as soon as you kind of leave, as long as you're not in a faith-based institution, and then it becomes something that you have to again be more intentional about. So for me, it was more of a change, but it was something that I was able to learn and grow through. When it's not being forced down your throat every day, you really learn what's important to you.
Absolutely. Definitely comes down to intentionality at the end of the day and trying to control, how much you want to grow in your faith. Um, you know, Kind of on a different note, thinking about students looking to become a financial analyst in some aspect, what are your biggest recommendations to them, and kind of what steps do you recommend that they try to take to become a financial analyst?
Yeah, so piggybacking off of what we were talking about earlier, I think it's important to take a little time. Like, don't dive into something right away unless you absolutely have to. Um, it, and a circumstance that you would absolutely have to is like you're an international student and your visa like is going to like expire unless you go to grad schools type of thing. Like that's kind of like um, the fund had a TA that had that situation, right? So it made a lot of sense for him to just go right into it. But I would just take a time. It takes some time. I took about 6 months to make sure that I wanted to do the CFA before I actually kind of like signed up and really got serious about studying. And I think that was on the shorter end. I'd just make sure that you really, really like something. And if you don't like something, be okay with waiting a while until you find something you do like, and then you explore kind of the steps there, right? So make sure you like the finance world, and if you like the investments world, you kind of have two paths. You have, if you want to do research, if you want to be in asset management, right? If you want to be buying and selling securities or coming up with investment strategies, then your best path is going to be through the CFA charter. It's a series of 3 difficult tests, but you can study for them at your own pace. And back when I took them, levels 2 and 3 were offered only once per year, and level was offered twice per year. In the future, they are doubling the number of times that you can take that test. And that takes a lot of pressure off you and makes the test a lot easier. Just because that pressure is off. I don't think, I think you still got to know the same stuff, but some people just don't perform well under pressure. And so I think it makes the test more approachable that way. If you want to stay on the fundamental side of asset management, the CFA might be all you need with a little, Excel proficiency and some experience, cutting your teeth as an associate somewhere, and that just updates models and grabs the donuts on Fridays. But on the quant side, if it can be beneficial to consider, tacking on a computer science degree or minor. I know Andrew Walker, my co-director, I'm sure will be a future guest here. He was a computer science, I think, minor, and you tag that onto your finance degree, and I think that will pair well. That with the CFA and some experience working with big data will get you a decent job, and probably a little bit more flexible job too, since you have that sort of data science tangent there too. That opens you up to a lot of different other industries as well. If you're looking to do literally anything else in the business or finance world, the CFA is probably not going to be worth it. And so if you're going to do like wealth management in the investment world, then you'll want to get the CFP because that's very valuable. It's a great industry to be in. And that's more of like what I did at Wells Fargo, where you get to talk with the clients and the people that you're actually impacting. It's super fulfilling work. If you're going to do anything else in finance, I would do an MBA or a master's in finance or a master's in data analytics. I mean, any of those will get you to where you want to be. If you want to keep chugging along, if undergrad was the end of the line for you, that's cool too. Finance is a great place to be, and you can just work your way up the career ladder. My guess is, though, a lot of us will find some sort of alternative method of education after we graduate, whether that's a formal master's level program or a charter or a certificate in something as well.
It really is amazing how many positions there are in finance at every level. Quite incredible.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of why I like finance in general. Just to cut you off really quickly,
right.
It's just that it's kind of a defensive play, right? Every company needs a finance department. So if you're good at finance but you're interested in something other than finance, you can go work for a company that does that. You're going to be using your finance skills. Hopefully you're good at that, right? But you can go do whatever you want, right? You can go work for Titleist if you like golf, right? You can go, work for Tesla if you like cars. You can work anywhere. And I think that's a really cool aspect of the finance world.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, I'm marketing and finance, and I like them both. Marketing seems to call me a little bit more, but being able to eventually use my finance background in a marketing position will be awesome.
I think the combination of those two is way more powerful than it was even 5 years, because they like almost automatically now they're also kind of like data people as well. So they like understanding how to go to market with the data that you have analyzed or had someone else analyze for you is a great critical thinking skill.
Yeah. So if you could go back to yourself while you were here at Bethel, what piece of advice would you give yourself or wish that someone had told you while you were at Bethel?
I made plenty of mistakes here. I'm sure I could have benefited from plenty of people's advice, but I kind of have like a positive comment here and probably maybe a little bit more sobering comment. And so let's end on a good note. I'll start with the more somber advice here. So, and this is going to sound a little irreverent. I think I could have saved myself a lot of pain in my life by just lowering my expectations of other people and the decisions that they make. Look, to a certain extent, it's not going to matter, how hard you push for something, asking a colleague for something, asking a third party for whatever. Sometimes, other people just have other agendas, and you can just lose yourself in if you think something's more important, or you think that they also will think that your priorities are high priority for them. Sometimes life just isn't fair, and you can't achieve certain goals because others are just trying to push those other agendas at the expense of what may be right for the company too. It might be an ethical thing for you to have to kind of wrestle with a little bit too. If you haven't taken finance, Sam, that's what I believe Holland still has us wrestle with, stuff like that. That very much happens in the real world. By adjusting your mindset to really, expect that sort of crap will save you a ton of time, pain, and confusion in the long run. And what it will also do is set you up to be surprised when good things do happen to you, right? That becomes really, really powerful because it puts you in a position of gratitude, which you can leverage to do even more and just feel good about the work that you're doing. That's the real point. It's not so much other people suck. It's really like, if you lower the expectations, you can really, really benefit from that by putting yourself in that position of being just really thankful for other people, even if they're just doing their job, because they probably got a lot of other stuff going on too. So relaxing assumptions of other people is going to help you out a lot. The more positive thing I wish I would have understood better is, coming out of Bethel, you'll be behind on some of the technical skills unless you have a major in something that's like that. But while critical thinking skills are far and away more valuable in the real world. And while I was at Bethel, I always felt a little behind on the technical side of things, especially investments related. We only had, one or two classes that were around that. But some of my peers, and it's better now for sure, but some of my peers took several valuation courses. They got deep into derivatives. They know about all these different markets and all of these different ideas. But guess what? Technology automates technical roles. Business leaders solve complex problems that are too intangible to be done by someone with a technical background or software at all. So the advice would be to celebrate the liberal arts education that you receive at Bethel and lean into it, because it's durable, it sets you apart in a good way, and you really need to start playing to those advantages, because your whole world is going to open up once you do, and don't ever apologize for it.
I love that. Definitely motivating for me to hear. And I think a lot of people will appreciate that advice, because I do think I completely agree with you. Going through Holland's finance SEM, the amount of critical thinking that goes into that and ethical decision making is, I'm enjoying it already, and people keep telling me how much I'll use that in the future. So absolutely, I completely agree. Well, Lucas, thank you very much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it and the time that you gave me, and I look forward to chatting more in the future. And I know our listeners are going to love to hear this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. Good to talk to you as well, and thanks again for doing this. I've loved listening to these, so keep it rolling.
Now you got to hear a little bit about Lucas Bunting and his role as a quantitative equity analyst at Mars and Power. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. To learn more about the Royals Investment Fund and what we do, you can go to our website at www.bethelroyalsfund.com. Follow us also on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm your host, Tony Harris, and I'll see you next time.